goddamn button. Push the goddamn button. You heard what she said.
So Rogan's kind of personal to me because I was a big fan. I started watching Rogan in about 2012, 2013, before anybody kind of knew who he was. I mean, he was an announcer on for the UFC, which I'm a big fan of, or I used to be a big fan of. Now I'm a kind of a fan, but they've decided to go partisan, which is just ignorant as hell, but they've chosen to do it. I still watch the fights, but I watch them for the fights. Okay. So, um, but he was really like in sports, there are commentators that are just commentators, and there are commentators that are amazing. And Joe Rogan was one of those. He was a commentator that basically told you what was going to happen before it happened. He helped you to understand the sport way better, and at the same time, he was entertaining. Tony Romo is like that for football. He's amazing because he helps you to understand what the quarterback's thinking, what the defense is planning on doing, all that stuff, even before it happens. So he was one of those guys, but he's also a guy who has reason for you to respect him greatly. He is a guy who um, has accomplished a lot. He's a world champion, I believe, in taekwondo or a striking martial art. Uh, he he's a black belt in jujitsu, which you cannot get unless you earn it. He's an actor, and he was on an Emmy award-winning TV show for a while, and he's a comedian. Now personally, I never thought he was very funny as a comedian, but he is a doer. He gets shit done, and even before he changed his spots, he was worthy of admiration and respect. And so, a lot of that, is what I liked about Joe Rogan himself. But also, it was very evident to me that he cared about people at that time. He cared about what happened to people. He cared about, making people's lives better. He cared about the truth, right? He cared about delving into things that didn't look right, but not just doing it just to do it. There are people that just like conspiracies just to like conspiracies and don't necessarily require any evidence for them. Well, he, in my opinion, wasn't one of those guys. He was a guy who looked into conspiracies because there was a reason to look into them. And the term conspiracy theory is ridiculous. I mean, it was turned into a pejorative because the CIA, who, speaking of architects, um, the CIA decided to make it a bad thing when they murdered JFK. So they kind of coined the term conspiracy theorist as a pejorative, when it's not really a pejorative. But my goal is to be a conspiracy factist, right? And look into conspiracies when there's evidence to look into them. So anyway, but in my opinion, he was one of those guys who looked into conspiracies when there was a reason to look into them. Um, he was also interested in facts. Like he was interested in finding new information about things. He had all these people from different walks of life, and this is when his show was completely apolitical. There was no political tint to it. It was just like, I'm going to have these guests on. I'm going to have this guest on. I'm going to have this expert on. I'm going to have this person on. Now, not everybody was an expert, right? There would be people who would be talking about conspiracy theories or without any expertise or reason for us to believe them. But still, he had a lot of experts on in their field and talked about different things that I was interested in. Hunting, uh, and things like that. So he was at that time, in my opinion, someone to be well respected, and he cared about people, and we were very much in line in terms of how we felt about humanity. Now, this podcast is 100% not a political podcast. This podcast is about humanity. I've never cared about politics. The only time I ever started paying attention to it is when it became about our humanity. And that was about a decade ago when I saw that our humanity was changing, and how we cared about each other was changing drastically. And I sounded the alarm to a lot of people around me, and they basically decided to choose their political persuasions versus looking at the facts and paying attention and admitting that our humanity was definitely under attack. So um, I've never been into politics. I'm only into what I need to be into to understand how we can make the world a better place for the most people. Now, back when I used to listen to Joe Rogan, his guest list was very different. It was filled with, he was in LA, right? So he had a lot of his friends on, and they were probably the most entertaining part, right? Because he would have comedians on. He would have Joey Diaz on a lot. And if you don't know who Joey Diaz is, he's a comedian, but he's also kind of been in an actor and had played bit parts throughout in Hollywood for a long time. But I mean, this dude can tell a story, and I mean, he could be talking about going to the movies and make that shit sound like the best experience you've ever heard. So he would have like other comedians on, which which was a great thing because he was basically platforming guys who didn't really have a platform, which I thought was admirable. He would have MMA athletes on, right? Because that was his domain. He would have military adjacent people, hunters. He would have people who were special. He would have people like I don't know if you know who David Goggins is, but he's a guy who basically doesn't seem to have a pain threshold. He just does superhuman fitness activities all the time. He would have this thing called a fight companion where he would watch the MMA fights and have his buddies on. And that was super entertaining because not only did we get to watch watch the fights, but we got to listen to him break the fights down with his crew, which was Brian Callen, Brian Schaub, and Eddie Bravo, and talk about another guy who's, I mean, he is like he could have his own damn show. This dude, I mean, he's a super duper conspiracy theorist. Let me start there, meaning, and I'm talking about the pejorative type, where he can see a conspiracy in this damn regular old battery operated clock here. Yeah, he's one of those dudes, but he is as entertaining as they come. He's another guy who can tell a damn story and make it like it's the most exciting thing in the history.
Did you know how many astronauts died in 1968?
2.
8. And then 2 more in 69.
What happened? What are they doing? Flying into space?
Accidents. His father, Prescott Bush, started the CIA. His father, Prescott Bush, financed the Nazis through Union Bank. That's not a conspiracy theory.
Wait, hold on, Eddie.
It's all CIA. You know, in Sweden, for many years, they sterilize kids that didn't have perfectly symmetrical faces.
Is that a fact?
That's actually not
Hey,
true.
that's some eugenics. That's some serious shit. That's why they're so good looking.
Yeah,
Because they
I don't know, Eddie.
No, look into it. You think that's crazy?
Wait a
Pretty
minute.
crazy,
wait a
bro.
minute. Wait a minute. When you say look into it, did you look into it?
I got on the internet. I got on the internet. Everything that's coming through the major news networks all have an agenda behind it, whether it's because if I was running shit, if I was running shit and they said, hey, what do you think we should do? I'm like, wait a minute, are you guys controlling the media, first of all? If they say, no, we're not really controlling the media, they do whatever they want, I would say, control the goddamn media. What the fuck are you guys doing?
How would
I get my information at the library, guys. I go to the library.
Apple bottom. I'm so
Go
bummed.
on the
about
fucking
this.
internet.
Who goes to the library?
I go to the
these days?
library. You guys get your information from the internet. I go to the library.
I love
libraries?
how you say the internet as if it's all the same source.
He was in this amazing documentary, just a fucking life-changing documentary called The Principle. Have you seen that?
No, I've not.
Fuck. Yeah, Michio Kaku's in it. A bunch of physicists, like professors from MIT.
That's so funny,
I
man.
just saw
It's
that
the best.
documentary, Sugar Coated.
Oh my God.
Have you seen it?
It's terrifying.
Holy shit. Real quick documentary. This is one that I've watched over and over. It's really, really good.
If you say it's the best of all time, I'm gonna freak out.
No, it's not. It's not. But it's really, really good. Because especially for conspiracy theorist type,
Okay,
it's called How Big Oil Conquered the World. There's a
Right? He's like one of those dudes that will make the story exciting no matter what it is. So, but even more than that, speaking of Eddie Bravo, he is a guy who, within jiu-jitsu, he created his own kind of technique within the sport. And the old guard kind of like got a little bit butthurt by it, but the shit was revolutionary. And he went out to Brazil where they, they created jiu-jitsu. It's called Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and beat the guys in his weight class that were supposed to be the best from Brazil in the old guard of jiu-jitsu. And it shocked the whole entire world of MMA, or not MMA, but jiu-jitsu, because nobody's supposed to beat those guys. And he created his own form of jiu-jitsu, employing this thing called the rubber guard and some other stuff. I mean, I'm revolutionary. Like, so this dude also, let me give some respect to his group. He formed this thing called 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, and they have gyms everywhere now, I believe. But yeah, this dude formed his own freaking brand of jiu-jitsu out of nothing. So he's a guy who deserves a great deal of respect. Now he's going to get you, like, if you talk to him for 5 minutes, he's going to find a conspiracy in something. So be prepared for that. But anyway, those are the guys he used to have on. And then he moved to Austin, and his guest list changed dramatically. So we'll get to that in a minute. But the first time I noticed Joe starting to kind of like change a little bit was, I think, around 2017. He was talking to an ex-football player who also I respect a lot. His name is Arian Foster. I think he's a seeker of truth and a person who cares about other people. And he is an athlete who kind of carves his own path, and respect him a lot. But anyway, he was talking to Arian Foster about the moon landing and about his doubts about the moon landing, which there are very good reasons to believe that we didn't go to the moon, but that's a whole nother story. But Arian Foster asked him why he kind of changed his tune about the moon landing, meaning he kind of backed off of it a little bit. And his response was, well, I just know that I don't know enough to opine about the moon landing, right? So naturally, my question was, well, what?
From like being a moon landing denier to like, you're
That's a good question.
crazy if you don't. Think we
No,
went
I
there.
don't think we're crazy. No, this is my take on it. Absolutely, I don't know enough about astrophysics, about space travel,
Right.
about the science that's the work that's been done, about how to get a rocket to the moon and back. I definitely don't know enough.
It's rocket science.
And I've looked at a lot of very compelling documentaries that explain why they think it was hoaxed. And they'll show you some footage, and you can look at some of the footage, and it looks fake as fuck. There's some footage that, to me, looks really doctored. There's
this day?
Yeah, to this day. There's some when you ever seen ones where it looks like they're on wires, like the astronauts are on wires?
I have.
There's some where there's a video where they look like they're on a trampoline. They're bouncing around on trampolines.
Mm-hmm.
The physics are different in different videos. This is where it gets weird. Like, the physics are different from the Apollo 11 moon landing. We see them waddle around on the surface of the moon. They're moving at like half speed. And then you see them in other ones, like the one where they bounce around the air. You're like, wow, they're moving different. They're in the same thing, but it looks different. The first one was very grainy. They showed it on a projection screen.
Right.
There's a couple different possibilities. One possibility is it just looks weird because it's on the moon and your brain is trying to interpret it and your brain's going, well, that's fake, because you don't really understand what 1/6 Earth's gravity really does to a body.
What it is, yeah.
That's one possibility. Another possibility, which has been shown to be true, is that some of the stuff that they passed off as being legitimate photographs of space travel was actually test runs where they blacked out the background and pretended that they were in space. And there's one really clear example of this. It's Michael Collins. Michael Collins, who was a guy who was aboard Apollo 11.
Right.
And Gemini 15, there's a photo of him in the middle of a, what is it when they walk around outside the spacewalk? They call it
Spacewalk,
spacewalk? Why does that seem like a bad word? It's like spacewalk. Like if it doesn't seem like that's the official title. Well, it's in the middle of a spacewalk.
It's probably something more.
Yeah.
A little more syllables.
Yeah, something slicker. Anyway, so he's doing the spacewalk and he's got this harness on. He's holding on to this like thing, and it was apparently just an image that had already been published of him in a training exercise, and they blacked out the background and flipped the picture upside down.
That's the joint right there.
It's the same exact photo. Same exact photo. I mean, people have lined it up and switched it over. It's the same photo. It's just been edited. So the one on the left was them practicing how to use these. I don't guess that the harness is some sort of a thing that he's hanging on to.
Right,
I guess it moves him around a little bit.
Right.
They were trying to practice it on the left, and on the right, they just passed it off. But those are publicity photos, right?
Right.
So you got to go, well, okay, well, who approves of publicity photos? It could easily be just some idiot who works in the publicity department who did marketing, who didn't think they had enough photos from the moon that were good of spacewalks. It's probably insanely difficult to take a spacewalk photo. Right. So does that mean that they faked the moon landing? No, but it means that people fake things. So you got to got to be really objective and looking at that. Right. Okay, so people say fake things. They definitely filmed a lot of the training exercises that they did of the moon landing. Right. They filmed a lot of shit. They definitely did. If that has already been proven, that they took this fake photograph and they tried to pass it off as a real spacewalk, it's entirely possible that some of the stuff that they filmed, they made out to look like they were on the moon when they were not.
Right, because nothing changed. Joe opines about stuff he doesn't know anything about all the time, right? He opines about vaccines. He doesn't know anything about vaccines. He opines about health. Doesn't know anything about health. Like he used to kill chiropractic. Doesn't know the first thing about chiropractic. He's absolutely wrong. Let me not say wrong. I don't believe in that word, but he is absolutely unfounded in any of his opinions about chiropractic because he literally just has a bad idea, a negative interpretation of it, probably expressed to him by a bunch of his buddies. Does not know a thing about it, but the point is that he talks about things he doesn't know about all the time. Nothing changed. No information came out. Nothing. Anyway, the point is that his opinion changed about it for some reason, and his explanation did not hold up to muster. So that's the first kind of like hint that I was like, what the hell, right? So he still was a guy who I felt like cared about people. He did a interview with Ben Shapiro back in, can't remember how long ago that was, but it was wild, maybe 2016, 2017, something around that time, and made him look like the fool he absolutely is. Ben Shapiro, like a lot of people think he's an intellect. He's absolutely not. You cannot be an intellect if you lead people astray. You cannot be an intellect if you're just a propagandist who's making money off of being a particular persuasion, and all you do is defend that persuasion, whether it's right wing, left wing, whether it's being Jewish or not being Jewish, whether it's being whatever it is. You cannot be considered an intellect if you are a propagandist, and by propagandist I mean all you do is spin your own facts to make your particular persuasion looked better than it actually is. So, there's an official definition of propaganda. I don't have it pulled up, but so Ben Shapiro's an absolute imbecile with respect to intellect because he not only does he miss the boat on most things he's talking about because he's one-sided. Like I saw him recently, like have a guest on denying the JFK assassination conspiracy, which is insane because nobody with any brains would at this point. We have so much information. We know, basically at this point we know everything except who pulled the trigger. We know who was behind the plot. Jim Garrison in 1967 basically knew all of the players at that time. So but anyway, there's a reason why somebody who has access to the information he has is propagating certain false narratives, uh, but clearly is not a person that you can call an intellectual. Okay. Then with Joe Rogan, though, the left started to turn on him, and I defended him in my early podcast during that time. They were calling him a right winger, and because he would have guests on that the left felt like shouldn't be on, right? What was that guy's name? Milo Yiannopoulos was one guest he had on that was kind of super controversial, and a lot of people didn't think he should have on. But then, he had on a lot of hunters, which the left didn't like. And then he would have on, I think he had on Gavin McInnes, who's a right wing white Christian nationalist supremacist. And the left did not like the fact that he had those people on. Now, you can argue about whether or not you would like him to have those people on, but that doesn't necessarily make him a right winger if he wants to listen to different opinions, right? So the left became really harsh towards him and started calling him a shill for the right and all this. And I actually did a podcast defending him. And in that video he did with Ben Shapiro, he really made Ben look like an idiot, right? Because they was talking about race in America and the consequences of slavery and America's oppression. And Ben Shapiro had nothing for him because Ben Shapiro doesn't care about the facts. He cares about his propaganda.
Is there middle ground? So if we look at 1776 and we look at the Declaration of Independence and we look at America today in 2020, there clearly is some impact in the echoes of slavery, and then after that, Jim Crow. There's clearly some impact in these deeply impoverished communities that don't seem to advance.
Yes. So to make the argument about institutional racism, there's a couple ways you can read this. When people say systemic racism or institutional racism, I usually ask them to be a little more specific in what they mean, because there are a few ways you can read that. One is history has impact. Of course, that's true, right? That's true for everybody. It's true in your family history. Right? If you have a grandfather who went to prison on a particular charge, that leads to poverty for your parents, which led to more poverty for you, right? People have histories. Those histories are embedded in their life experiences, and that's true for societies as well. All of that is for sure true. Then there's the question as to whether the institutions today are racist. And that's not quite the same thing, right? Because history has consequences is not the same thing as saying the rules today are racist. Because the rules today are not racist, actually. The rules today are quite not racist. But
historically, it's fairly recent. If you go from the civil rights movement to 2020, we're really not talking about that much time.
We're talking about 3 generations.
50 plus years.
60 years, yeah.
I
mean, it's
50 plus.
Right,
in the world of,
in the vast span of human history, it's not
a very small amount of time.
Right.
So clearly there's some impact of both racism and then Jim Crow laws. So that's where I'm saying there's a middle ground.
Yeah, and it is important for people on my side of the aisle, conservatives, to acknowledge and recognize the importance of history in people's living situations now. And it's important for people on the other side of the aisle to, at the same time, not attribute every single thing to history. Because
but
people
isn't there
who are born,
always something like that? There's always like extremes on each position, and the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, but I don't think that it lies as far in the dead center of that as people, I think, want it to. What I mean by that is the problems that have plagued communities in the United States, not just the black community in the United States, but problems of racism or problems of sexism. The way those get alleviated is people making better choices over time. Right? That is the problem. That's the way that those issues get alleviated. When Jews arrived in the United States in the early 20th century, to talk of my people, when they came, they were impoverished. They didn't speak the language. They were banned from country clubs. There was open discrimination against them. They were banned from Harvard. Right? Harvard Law School had quotas on Jews. the way to fight against that is to make good decisions. And so you fight against the system to make sure that the system has rules that apply equally to everyone.
Right, but you clearly see that there's a big difference between people coming over here willingly and doing so in order to better their lives versus someone whose ancestors were dragged over here to be sold as property, and then dealing with the repercussions of that being your family history and red line laws and all the other things that were put in place to sort of keep them in very specific areas, which to this day remain crime-ridden, gang-ridden, deeply impoverished communities.
Well, that's true, but the question is how much of that is historic redlining and how much of that is an 18-year-old kid today deciding to pick up a gun and shoot somebody?
But how much of that 18-year-old kid today deciding to pick up a gun and shoot somebody is based on him growing up in this fucked up environment where that's what he models, where everything around him is crime and gangs, and you imitate your atmosphere, which what all humans do.
Right, but the answer is there's only one way to break that chain.
What way is that?
That way is to not pick up a gun and shoot somebody.
I think that's a simplistic way of looking at it if you're on the outside of that community and you're not one of those 18-year-old kids that grows up with the incredible influence of all the people around him, and that's all you see, and that's all you know.
Well, but the problem is the only way that's going to be the thing that your kid doesn't know is for you not to do it. At some point, personal agency has to come in.
It does,
because
education and teaching them about personal agency and letting them understand that there's a way out of this and that the path that they see being replicated over and over again by these people that wind up dying young, that wind up going to jail, that there are other options. There's a lot of kids that never get that other information. Or if they get it, they get little blips of it, but the vast majority of the information, the vast majority of the influence they get is terrible.
Well, I totally agree with this. And this is why I think the worst thing that you can say to a kid is you're born behind the 8 ball and no matter what you do, you're not going to succeed.
Yes,
right? That's literally the worst thing you can say to a kid. What you should be saying is, look at how your grandfather was born behind the 8 ball and look how hard he had to work in order to get ahead. And look at all the
opportunities. That's true, though. But if your grandfather wasn't ahead, didn't get ahead, if your grandfather was in and out of jail, if your father was in and out of jail, if everyone around you is like that, if there's literally no influence that's positive in your life, the idea of saying to a kid like that, hey, don't pick up a gun and shoot somebody, that's way too simplistic a version of their future, in my
Well, I mean,
my
the problem is I don't see an alternative solution. Right? When you're talking about solutions.
I think an alternative solution is there has to be some sort of large-scale intervention in these communities to do something about what has already been set in motion and the momentum that keeps continuing decade after decade.
Anyway, the left was on his case, and I was a big defender of him. And then the left criticism kind of became nonstop for a while. So to sum it up, guys, Joe Rogan, BC, which is Joe Rogan before the change, was a guy who I respected a ton. He had compassion. He was a super knowledgeable guy. I mean, he had a lot of information in his brain that he could just rattle off back to back to back. He was insightful but inquisitive and was interested in the truth, interested in facts, interested in learning more, not interested in propaganda and information. But more than that, his guest list was way better. The entertainment value of his show was way better. BC, before the change. But his tone started to change. The left started to criticize him a lot more about things, and I understood it, although I didn't agree at the time. Because just because you choose to interview people who you don't agree with or who the mainstream doesn't agree with doesn't make you what they are. So I was, at this point, 100% Team Rogan. And I just want that dude back because I'm not sure where he went. So I hope that this kind of encapsulates what I saw before the change. And please like and subscribe if you are interested in this content. I will have a little bit more content on Joe Rogan The clips will come out gradually over time. The next clip in the sequence will be Joe Rogan DC during the change. So stay tuned for that one. Please like and subscribe just to get this stuff spread. And like I said, this is not the typical content. This is more personal and pop content. But going forward, it will be a lot more in depth, and the content will be more related to issues relating to humanity and improving the quality of our existence together. So have a fantastic day. I hope to talk to you soon.
Push the goddamn button. Push the goddamn button. You heard what she said.